Indiana Fever lose to a young Washington Mystics team, 83-77. Look lost without Caitlin Clark.
I'll say it. Fire Stephanie White. Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
What an absolute disaster for the Indiana Fever. An 83-77 loss to a struggling Washington Mystics team exposed just how lost this franchise is without Caitlin Clark. Fans are furious, and some are even calling for Coach Stephanie White to be fired. Let's break down this embarrassing performance, why Sydney Colson flopped, and what this means for the Fever's future. If you're as shocked as I am, stick around and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive in. The Fever's first game, without Caitlin Clark, their superstar point guard, sidelined for at least 2 weeks with an injury. The Mystics, coming off a 3-game losing streak, saw their chance and pounced. The result? A brutal 83-77 beatdown that had Fever fans screaming at their screens.
This was a absolute embarrassment. An embarrassing performance from the Indiana Fever.
Sydney Colson, stepping in as the starting point guard, was supposed to keep the ship afloat. Instead, she sank it. 4 points on 2 for 7 shooting, 3 turnovers, and 5 fouls in 31 minutes. That's not just a bad game, it's a meltdown.
Sydney Colson started at point guard, stabbed me in the eye with a dull spoon. Literally scoop out my eyeball and just throw it. I mean, it'd be less painful than having to watch this.
The offense looked like a pickup game gone wrong. 0 fast break points, 0. The Fever, usually powered by Clark's 19 points and nearly 10 assists per game, couldn't move the ball. Teammates stood around waiting for something, anything to happen. Colson couldn't deliver. One fan summed it up perfectly on social media. Sydney Colson needs to leave basketball before basketball leaves her. Ouch. And then there's Aaliyah Boston, an MVP candidate who played fewer minutes than Colson and took just 5 shots, despite going 4 for 5.
Aaliyah Boston played less minutes than Sydney Colson. Aaliyah Boston played less minutes than Sid Colson. Aaliyah Boston, MVP candidate up to this point, All W candidate Aaliyah Boston, played less minutes than comedian, full-time comedian, part-time basketball player Sydney Colson.
5 shots for your most efficient player? That's criminal. Kelsey Mitchell, the supposed second option, went 4 for 16 for 14 points, struggling to create her own shot. The offense, usually buzzing with 22 assists per game, dropped to a measly 15. Turnovers piled up, 17 or more, setting a season high. This wasn't a team, it was chaos. Washington's Brittany Sykes and Kiki Irvin combined for 37 points and 17 rebounds, outshining Indiana's stars. Even their rookies, Sonia Citron and Erie Offen, chipped in 29 points combined. That's what depth looks like, something the Fever clearly lack.
Sid Colson is the worst point guard I have ever seen in the WNBA. And I've watched Julie Van Loo play bad games. And if you guys have ever seen heard about or watched Julie Van Loo in a bad game, it can get like painful to watch.
The Mystics dominated the second quarter 25-7, and the Fever had no answer, no adjustments, no fight, which brings us to Coach Stephanie White. Fans are livid, and I get it. White knew Clark's injury was coming. There was time to prepare, to tweak the offense, to have a backup plan. Instead, she plugged in Colson and hoped for the best. That's not coaching, that's crossing your fingers. Rotations made no sense. Sophie Cunningham played 20 minutes for just 2 points, yet White kept her in. Timeouts? Barely used, even as Washington went on runs. Fans were begging for changes that never came.
I mean, this offense looked awful, and Sydney Colson, my God, is terrible running point guard on this team. Terrible.
One X-Post nailed it. Everyone saw the problems in real time, except the coaching staff. White's post-game comments about the offense looking different felt like excuses. Where was the accountability? Why no new sets or better rotations? Good coaches adapt when their star goes down. White didn't. And don't get me started on the defense, or lack thereof. The Fever don't play defense, they just play slow, hoping opponents miss shots. Holding Washington to 83 points was luck, not skill. This loss wasn't just about missing Clark's scoring. It was about losing the entire system she creates. The Fever's offensive rating plummets from 107.5 with Clark to 87.7 without her. That's a championship contender reduced to a lottery team in one night. And with 3,000 no-shows at a game that would have sold out with Clark, you can feel the fan base's frustration. Coach Stephanie White, Fever fans are absolutely livid, and honestly, can you blame them? This 83-77 loss to a struggling Washington Mystics team wasn't just a bad night. It was a coaching disaster that
Sydney Colson, definitely not a backup point guard for this team. Now, the Indiana Fever with Caitlin Clark against the Atlanta Dream scored 12 points in a quarter. The Indiana Fever with Caitlin Clark scored 13 points in a quarter. The Indiana Fever without Caitlin Clark have back-to-back quarters scoring 17 points in one and 13 points in another. What about Sydney Colson's game today made you feel like, oh, okay, Sydney Colson can ball up? That was a good signing. Did she give energy that you guys looked at and said, oh, this is reassuring? No. Did she make plays that you guys saw and said, oh, this is reassuring? No. What about the game plan today made you feel like this team was ready at all? If there was a game plan at all, what about it made you feel like this team was ready at all?
exposed serious flaws in White's leadership. Fans are calling for her head, and the hashtag yet, what did we see? Sydney Colson, a backup point guard who looked completely overwhelmed, was thrown into the starting role with no apparent plan. White didn't adjust the offensive system to compensate for Clark's absence. She didn't design new sets to get Aaliyah Boston more touches or help Kelsey Mitchell find easier shots. Instead, she plugged Colson in and crossed her fingers, hoping the team could just figure it out. That's not coaching, that's gambling with the franchise's season. Let's break down the in-game decisions that had fans screaming at their screens. The rotations were a mess. Aaliyah Boston, an MVP candidate averaging 18. 5 points per game, played fewer minutes than Colson and took just 5 shots. 5. Your best post player, shooting 4 for 5, and you can't get her the ball? Meanwhile, Sophie Cunningham played 20 minutes and scored a whopping 2 points. 2 points. Why was she out there so long when she was clearly struggling? White kept running the same ineffective lineups, watching the offense stall and the turnovers pile up, 17 or more, a season high. Fans on X were begging for adjustments as early as the second quarter, with one post summing it up. Stephanie White is watching this train wreck like it's a Netflix documentary. Do something. Then there's the timeout usage, or lack thereof. Washington went on a devastating 25-7 run in the second quarter, and White didn't call a single timeout to stop the bleeding. Good coaches use timeouts to disrupt momentum, regroup, and draw up plays. White just stood there, arms crossed, looking like she'd given up. Compare that to someone like Cheryl Reeve of the Minnesota Lynx, who's known for making real-time adjustments when her star, Nafisa Collier, is off the court. Reeve has backup plans, screens, cuts, and motion sets that keep the offense flowing. White? It looked like she had no plan B, and the team paid the price. Post-game, White's comments only fanned the flames. She said the offense looked different without Clark. Well, no kidding, coach. But where was the explanation for the lack of preparation? Why no accountability for the poor rotations or the failure to get Boston involved? Fans wanted answers, not excuses. One X-user posted, "Stephanie White sounds like Christy Sides too." Zero saying what we want to hear but delivering nothing. Now that's a brutal comparison to Sides, the former coach who was criticized for similar failures. Another fan wrote, "This team practices, right? Because it looked like they met in the parking lot and picked teams." This loss raises bigger questions about White's fit for this franchise. The Fever are built around Caitlin Clark, a generational talent who elevates everyone around her. A good coach builds a system that can survive without the star, even for a few games. Look at the Las Vegas Aces. When Aja Wilson rests, Becky Hammon has plays ready for Chelsea Gray or Kelsey Plum to step up. The Fever? They collapse like a house of cards. The offensive rating dropped from 107.5 with Clark to a pathetic 87.7 without her. 0 fast break points. 0. That's not just missing a player. That's a coaching staff failing to instill any kind of identity or adaptability. Fans are also pointing out White's history. In Connecticut, she was criticized for relying too heavily on star players like Alyssa Thomas without developing depth. Sound familiar? X-posts are digging up old clips of White's Sun teams struggling when key players sat. One user even suggested Mark Jackson as a replacement, noting his experience coaching Steph Curry and his Indiana ties.
This was embarrassing. This was embarrassing. And how much grace are we going to give to a coach because the coach says, We're working things out for the rest of the season. We're trying to figure out our identity. Do you want to know what your identity is? You shouldn't need to figure out your identity. You have Caitlin effing Clark on your team. You've spent the whole time saying Caitlin Clark injured will help us find our identity. You have Caitlin Clark on your team. Do you want to know what you should try to do? Do you want to know what you should try to do? And I understand you cannot play Caitlin Clark ball without Caitlin Clark. At least run. Put in some effort. Run. Don't try to grind a team down and win a game in the 70s. Because when Caitlin Clark comes back, you're not going to be able to do that. You have spent this whole season talking about needing to figure out the team's identity when you are coaching Caitlin Clark. You are coaching Caitlin Clark.
Jackson's no-nonsense style and ability to maximize star-driven offenses could be a game-changer for a team like the Fever. Whether that's realistic or not, the fact that fans are already floating new coaches shows how deep the frustration runs. The next 2 weeks are a make-or-break moment for White. Can she design an offense that doesn't rely on Clark's brilliance? Can she make in-game adjustments to stop runs and maximize her roster? Or will she keep trotting out lineups that don't work and hoping for a miracle? The Fever have talent, Boston, Mitchell, Natasha Howard, but talent means nothing if the coach can't put it together. If White can't turn this around, the calls to fire Stephanie White will only get louder. Fans showed up to a game that would have been sold out with Clark, and 3,000 seats sat empty. That's a statement. This franchise can't afford to look this unprepared again.